Bienvenidos de nuevo a Economic Zones en Casa SEAT. Venimos de aprender las lecciones que nos ha dejado el COVID en el comercio de África. Y es que queremos convertir las dificultades en retos, en oportunidades, pero también queremos trabajar de forma segura para garantizar la salud de las personas y la prosperidad de nuestras empresas. ¿Cómo podemos conseguir zonas económicas libres de virus? Este es el título del panel que ahora trataremos, BCLEAN, con el doctor Mohan Guruswamy, desde Dubái. Él es Chief Knowledge Officer de la Organización Mundial de Zonas Francas. Buenos días. Salam, Dr. Mohan.
Thank you.
A pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure too.
Thank you. El doctor Mohan moderará este diálogo entre Sherif Muhtaseb, desde Austria. Salam, good morning. Buenos días.
Yeah, good morning. Pleasure to be here.
The same pleasure to have you here. Y también tenemos a Josep Miquel Piqué, desde aquí, a mi vera.
En Barcelona, buen día.
Buen día, ¿cómo estén?
Good morning. Buenos días.
Pues hasta aquí la presentación. Go on, Dr. Mohan.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. A very warm welcome to this panel on BCLEAN, virus-free economic zones. BCLEAN basically could connote several aspects: clean environment, clean water, sanitation, hygiene, clean air, pollution-free, eco-friendly, safe zone, health, safety. So this panel today, which has distinguished panelists, will discuss techniques of what is the road to recovery for economic zones as post-COVID era, how to protect and strengthen the free zones, the economic zones, how to prevent these problems, and also how to encourage cleanliness. You know, all of us learned in basic schools, the saying goes, cleanliness is next to godliness. And therefore, this maxim is so true in today's context. Let me have the pleasure of introducing two of the most global distinguished guests that I have moderated in so many years. Let me start with Dr. Joseph Miquel Piquet. It's a very, very long introduction, but I'll try and shorten it. He's a telecommunication engineer with a doctorate in ecosystems of innovation. He also holds diploma from MIT and UC Berkeley in the Bay Area in California. He's the president of Catalan Network of Science Parks. He is the vice president of Spanish Network of Science Parks and 17th president of International Association of Science Parks and Areas of Innovation. He wears several hats, and he has been an expert in European Commission, United Nations Commission for Europe, and also has been CEO of District Innovation 22 at Barcelona. Welcome, Dr. Piquet. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Let me also introduce my good friend, whom I know for a long time, Mr. Sherif Muhtaseb. High experienced with over 20 years in economic zones as a practitioner, involved in zone development. He's, for the last 9 years, working for the World Bank Group on mega projects of various configurations, and he works with governments to support their development of competitive and sustainable economic zones. With that as a short preamble, let me start with my questions. I will have two questions to Dr. Piquet, and then we followed it by two more to Mr. Sherif Muhtaseb. Dr. Piquet, with your extensive background on innovation, would you provide some broad guidance on how free zones should digitalize to be more clean? Dr. Piquet, please.
Yeah, Thank you very much for the question. When we want to adopt technologies, that's the moment that we are in this moment in this life. We have a tsunami of new technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, and so on. We have the challenge not only to answer the problems that we have in front of us, for instance, COVID, but also for understanding how we will use the technology in order to create new products and new services. The first source of innovation could be a demand side or could be a technology push approach. In this approach, we need to manage very well in the free zones, in the economic zones, how can we use this technology for adopting and adapting and applying this technology in order to innovative products and to develop new services. But this is one of the challenges. The second challenge is how can we find innovation in terms of applications? What kind of solutions, what kind of new ideas I can use? And this is interesting because we are in the era of open innovation. This is not anymore that the innovation will be inside the walls of my company. The innovation is in the wall. And I have to manage the innovation, adopting and making calls for innovations, like Vinay is doing, by the way, with the startups. We need to listen very well what the startups are doing, because the startups are the machine that we have in the ecosystems for discovering what's next. Discovering what's next, technology inside the product. Discovering what's next, service or customer, or discovering what is the new business model. That's the reason why the economic zones must be ready to be also a platform of innovation for entrepreneurs. But if we know what's next in terms of new challenges and new ideas, we need to know and we need to check what's next with pilots. Pilots means evidence. Pilots means how we will apply this technology inside the product with a real customer. And that is a wonderful moment for economic zones. How can we use the economic zones as a living labs, as a place for developing pilots locally in order to scale globally? That's, at the end of the day, economic zones are the first mile of innovation in the global arena. That's the reason why I feel that economic zones must to promote this kind of pilots in order to do what? The four elements of adoption: scalability, industrialization. How can we use this pilot in order to scale globally, connecting with other economic zones and also connecting with other markets? That's the reason why we are now in a very special test, COVID test. This is not only a health test, it's also a technology test. How we will use this technology for discovering what's next, for developing new ideas, for developing pilots, and for scale.
Wonderful, Dr. Piquet. I think just as a follow-up question to that, I think very well said. I think we need to do the technology push. We need to focus on more open innovation rather than closed innovation, which used to be in the past, and collecting ideas from people. And when you talked about startup, I just want to share with you and the audience, we have a very unique, innovative business model in one of the high-tech free zones in Dubai, the Silicon Oasis. What it does is created an incubation center which does hand-holding for young entrepreneurs. It collected resources from the large companies. Any free zone has 80–90% of SMEs, 10–15% of large companies. It collected resources, established a zone, and then does hand-holding for young entrepreneurs, as you rightly pointed out, the startups. And these startups become suppliers to the large organization. It's a win-win for everyone. The large organization have a supplier next door. The entrepreneurs have an incubation center to do their hand-holding. Free zone authorities are happy that they are getting new entrepreneurs. So it's a win-win for all. Dr. Piquet, just as a follow-up from a BCLEAN point of view, which is the focus,
Yep.
how do you advise free zones in terms of digitalization, please? Yes.
First, let me support and endorse your idea of that innovators and ecosystems of innovation, we have two sides, the side of exploration and the side of exploitation, the side of entrepreneurs and the side of big corporations, and this part of the ecosystem. Who is the platform? The economic zones. That's the reason why we have a big responsibility developing economic zones as an ecosystem of innovation. In order to promote digitization, what we have to develop is, at the end of the day, let me share with you 5 laws of how to transform our economy more digital. The first one is what a bit can do is not for an atom to do. It means whatever we can put in the cloud is better to be in the cloud. Papers, music, whatever. This is a first message. And we have to think about every single action in our daily base. How can we put everything to the cloud? But this is about digitization. Digitization. This is a very complex word for a Spanish person. Second, it's about the digital relationships. We need to discover more and more how to put this relationship with customers, the relation between companies, but at the end of the day, the e-commerce, how can we make better dialogue in a digital way and obviously also in a presential way. The third law is a law that is sending a clear message. Whatever we have in the earth, we can put in the cloud. It means Internet of Things. Every single thing in the earth must be connected to the cloud. Why? Because if we have to the cloud this information, we can share, we can use, and at the end of the day, we can manage better. That's the big goal of Industry 4.0. In this way, what we are adding is how the technology is transforming our relationship, our way of managing our documents, videos, and music, but also how can we manage our reality, our day-by-day. But let me tell you that from my point of view, the natural way of our new economy will be to be everything to the cloud. Why everything to the cloud? Because we will ask to the cloud to come to the earth, to go down to the earth whenever we need. That's the way that the consortium of Zona Franca is doing with the new D-Factory. It's a printing 3D factory. It's printing on demand. It's using and delivering and printing whatever we need. This is a change in the value chain and also the way of managing the economic zones. All of that means that we'll be more clean because we will not use more paper, we will share infrastructures, and also we will print on demand. It means that we have just the material that we need. But in order to be clean, we have to be clean in virus. That's the reason why the last message is about any free zone without virus means virus with bits. It means we have to control every single track of people in order to be and to manage in terms of ecosystem also of virus, in order to avoid that any person with virus is inside the place, but also, if we have any case, we have to track this person. That's the reason why the law number 5 is about virus with bits. It means that we have to prevent our economic zones without virus.
Wonderful. I think that was so meaningful, the 5 laws. Makes a lot of sense. I think for our audience who are listening today, it's such a lot of value addition to their knowledge. If you move on to the cloud, yeah, it supports you automatically to become clean. You need to have digital relations, Internet of Things. So it helps the entire value chain in terms of becoming digitalized and then becoming clean. Very well said, Doctor. Let me move on to my good friend, Mr. Sharif. Sharif, you've been with the World Bank for more than 9 years, and you are a hardcore economic zones person for over 20 years. Now, what have been some of the operational protocols that you have seen zones adopt during the COVID crisis? Do you think they are typically short-term measures or they are here to stay? In other words, what are the measures? Out of that, what would continue to stay even if we get over COVID? And what would be temporary? Please.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Mohan. Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, again, pleasure to be here. Yeah, I think I just maybe I'll start off on the back of what was really being discussed in terms of digitization. I mean, that's clearly something that's moving forward and started before COVID. Perhaps COVID has accelerated digitization, and the need for digitization is more obvious. And I think during the COVID sort of crisis over the last several months, there's certainly been more of a push to increase digitization of services and documents, and the relationship with investors is becoming more digital, as those Dr. Joseph very eloquently articulated. And of course, the more digitization, the less human interaction, and therefore opportunities to mitigate the spread. And I think that's there to stay. That's just going to get sort of bigger and bigger and more embedded within zone operations. I think on a more tangible level, perhaps on a more on-the-ground level, just the physical cleaning of zones, that was there. It's kind of started almost straight away. We saw many zones around the world just getting out and cleaning their facilities, their roads, their buildings, their warehouses. So just the physical, tangible, what you can see in front of you. Also, the closing of shared spaces we've seen, so like things like food courts and restaurants and cafes, they were sort of closed during the COVID period. Hopefully, a time will come where they reopen again. And obviously, workers that work inside zones need to have a break and go and have lunch and coffee and what have not. I think we've also seen distribution of PPE within the zones. So the zone operators and authorities working with the firms, just to make sure that all their staff, all the workers that are continuing to work are wearing the right equipment, have the right equipment to protect themselves and their employees. But also we see in terms of limiting the number of actually people going into the zone. So you see zones are limiting the number of people going in cars entering zones or in buses entering zones. Or other forms of public transport. So that's kind of social distancing and keeping the numbers to a manageable level within the zone. Kind of we've seen that, and also that's I suppose that's more of the on the ground what is visible, but also behind the scenes operationally a few things have been going on and we've been seeing. So a lot of the zone operators and the authorities have been setting up COVID response task forces and committees just to ensure there is some kind of operational continuity within the zone, that they can service the investors and meet their needs as much as possible, ensuring that there is a skeleton staff within the zone management offices and the authority offices, as well as those that are continuing to work but remotely. And also investor hotlines for investors and workers to call up or get online and directly address any questions and concerns. A couple of final thoughts on that as well, in terms of, and this is more medium term perhaps, it's already started, and this is certainly something to stay, is many sort of zones and authorities have perhaps been kind of caught off guard by this, perhaps realised they were not as well prepared as perhaps they thought. So you're seeing a lot of talk and thinking about kind of putting in place and systemising disaster response management processes and systems so that they are more flexible and more agile to adapt to any such future crises happen in the future, that they can immediately mobilize and activate their systems they have in place to address these things. And last but not least, I suppose at the policy level, you've seen like in some countries where they still have the EPZ model, which is the export processing zone model, where typically companies in these zones are obliged to export the majority of their products overseas. And I think operationally to help investors there, some countries have done away with that, so that the companies, the factories in the zones to actually have access to the domestic market. So that's kind of some of the things we've been seeing on the ground. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think we heard the strategic perspective from Dr. Joseph, and now we heard the operational protocols and perspective from you. That sort of completes. And I agree that physical cleaning, PPE, and having task forces closing down some of the sensitive areas where things could spread much more are some of the activities. But what about worker welfare? You've been with Jebel Ali Free Zone, if I remember right, 8,000 companies, possibly 40,000 plus employees getting into the zone every day and getting out every day. What measures you think world over zones have taken to support the workers during these difficult times, please?
Yeah, and that's an important issue actually. And at the end of the day, worker welfare is really a critical pillar of zones and how they operate, and workers need to be treated fairly and responsibly, and zones are very good at doing that. I think we've seen some things with zones globally. Firstly, providing healthcare facilities, so that any workers that do fall sick, make sure that they have access to healthcare, whether that's in the zone or whether that's outside of the zone. But zone operators and authorities usually are very good and very conscious that workers within the factories in the zones need to be supported and taken care of. And obviously, providing healthcare during such a situation is a fundamental part of that. But in addition to that, I think we've seen a lot of communication and education of workers and the factories that they work for, in terms of social distancing and hand washing and just communicating with them. What are some of the safety guidelines that need to be adhered to? And in many cases, it's a reinforcement of what's already there in terms of EHS guidelines. But I think that communication there is key. And also related to that, some countries, they have workers coming from overseas, and some are domestic, and they don't always know what's going on and what they're entitled to and what kind of support is available to them. So you kind of see a lot of zone operators and zone authorities working with the tenants, the factories, warehouses, distribution centres, offices in the zones to communicate to their workers so they have accurate and timely information with respect to what's going on with the crisis, and to inform them of the support and resources that are actually available to them, because some of them, or many of them, may not actually know what is available to support them during that period. Maybe a couple of other points also to mention on that. We've seen that, and again, this has happened in some cases pre-COVID, and it's certainly happening during COVID, and I think it will kind of extend to the future. So a lot of zones are implementing kind of worker protection insurance schemes, whereby the tenants in the zones would pay into some kind of insurance or protection scheme, so that in the event that workers are laid off or the employers are unable to pay their wages, there is some kind of policy, some scheme there to help offer them some financial support. And perhaps last not least, on the worker welfare side of things, again, this is very much depending on the country and the context, but sometimes you see that workers are attached to a particular sponsor, a particular company within a zone. And we've seen a relaxation of that, so that workers can actually more freely move between employers. If one employer shuts down or is unable to pay wages, but their skills are still required by another employer that is still operating, that free or that easier transfer of employment from one firm to another, we see that kind of happening. Hopefully, that's something that would continue. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great. I think well said. Creating an awareness, communicating constantly what is happening around, educating them to be more hygienic, clean, and also looking after them in case they get into some trouble, seem to be some of the excellent practices in worker welfare. Let me move back to Dr. Joseph Piquet. Doctor, you gave an excellent introduction on how technology could help us. Now, can we build the new economy based only on new technology? Or do you reckon that we need something beyond technology to help us? Can you please respond, Doctor, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. This is a very interesting question, because it seems that it's all about technology. We use the technology inside the product or service, but let me tell you that we need a customer with a user for validating. But in any case, that's technology. Second, we need to put all our economic zones to the cloud. It means to connect everything to the cloud, everything in the earth to the cloud. But this is not enough. We need talent. Talent, at the end of the day, is the raw material of the knowledge-based economy. And managing talent means that we have to manage creation, attraction, retention, and development. It means when we were developing in 2022 at Barcelona a 200 hectares transformation of the old industrial land of Barcelona now in a new economic zone, we discovered how important was to put in the center of the district new universities that were providing talent, young talent to the district, not only because they were fresh people to the district and they were transforming our reality, also because they were the new workers of the new economy. That's the reason why it's so important to manage talent, not only in the attraction. I like very much Silicon Valley. I have been there. But it seems that it's a flight class talent. It means people from India, after a PhD in Berkeley, they work in Google. That's good, but this is not enough. We have to provide inclusive growth. We have to provide and promote vocations and also education for young people around the economic zones. That's the reason why we were promoting the schools of 22 at all the public and private schools to develop vocations on STEAM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Very important, the concept of talent, because without talent, we will not have raw material for our knowledge-based economy, but also will not have inclusive growth. It means we have economic development, but not social development. And we know that when we don't have both sides in a good balance, we have tensions in our reality. And this is also part of our responsibility as an economic zones, developing a good economy, but also developing a good society, and also developing a good environment. But it's not only talent. We will need to provide finance for the entrepreneurs, finance and venture capital and business angels and people that will invest in new ideas. Because if not, we have only banking systems. Banking systems are only investing in people that have history. And the problem of entrepreneurs that they are starting right now, they cannot tell more that they were doing things, but not really a fast track or a track of record of their past. Important role of the finance. That's the reason why we see how some economic zones are creating venture capital funds. They are promoting business angels networks, and at the end of the day, they are stimulating corporates to buy startups. At the end of the day, the exit plan of the startups. And the last one is, don't forget that with economic zones, we have customers, we have companies that could be the first users for the entrepreneurs. They could be the first testers, the people that will use the new innovation and will validate the innovation. The idea of the place as a place for new customers, that will be the place for validators, and at the end of the day, the concept of living lab. How can we use our place using and finding the first customer, the golden reference, that at the end of the day, the first customer will be the door for hundreds and thousands of customers around the world.
Wonderful. So very well said, Doctor. Apart from technology, of course, we need to have skill development. We need to have capability development. We need to have talent management. Acquire talents, develop talents, retain them. Because what's the point in only having a high technology? You need to have the right kind of people to manage that technology. So we need to have a knowledge, skill development exercise. And I liked your point of a social perspective to sustainability. You know, Michael Porter talks about shared value. He says economic value plus social value is shared value. There is no point in a country becoming richer and richer, and if the common man is unhappy, and if the environment is polluted, what's the point in generating that wealth? So inclusive growth, equitable distribution, fair distribution of wealth are very important factors which should support technology in, of course, being innovative and building free zones, providing finances. So you're looking at all the resources that are required for us to be successful, and technology is only one of those resources, though very important, but the human capital, the financial resource, and the social interaction, the intangible resource or the capital, intellectual capital, is also very important. And finally, you highlighted the role of customers. That's a lot of value addition and important points. Let me move to Mr. Sharif. Now, you talked about what kind of protocols we should have operationally, what kind of measures in worker welfare. But what specific guidance can you offer in terms of how zones have been interacting with their customers? Just linking with Dr. Piquet's point of, the customers should be adopters of technology, then only it will be successful. But what guidance would you offer in terms of how zones have been interacting with their existing tenants as well as prospective tenants? Please.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I completely concur what was said previously, and you've seen that around the world in many zones that what was discussed before about pilots and living labs, that's been going on, and I think the need for that escalated during the COVID and will go beyond that. I think startups and SMEs really appreciate the support that zones can offer them in terms of helping them with facilitating finance, as was discussed before, and also just helping them with business strategy and business planning, just to help them navigate the crisis and hopefully they'll kind of come out positively out of the other end. So everything that was discussed before in terms of the incubator, the helping them start up, the facilitating finance, that's completely concur, and it's important, and that's something for the future, and that's something which has been seen. And probably on top of that, I would probably say that, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the communication. I think what zones and what investors, the current investors in zones, are seeking from zone operators, zone authorities is just a constant feed of timely and accurate information. There's it's a very fast-moving situation, lots of information floating around out there. So I think just that timely provision of information so investors know what the situation is, what they can do, what they can't do, how the situation is changing. I think that's quite important, and the zone being accessible to them. Like I mentioned the hotline earlier. And I think also in terms of some more tangible support, we've seen that the zones around the world have been trying to offer financial support in terms of waiving or deferring rental payments and fees and that kind of thing. So that kind of support, that interaction with existing tenants has been there. Some of it is time bound, some of it is not. Just depends on when the crisis will finish. But that interaction has certainly been proved quite important from what we've been hearing. And also, there are factories within zones that have been repurposing instead of producing whatever it is. They've been repurposing to produce PPE and other things which are in demand. And so the zones have been really kind of supporting those factories by repurposing their production lines when needed, with respect to fast-track approvals, procedures, processes, enhancing their utility requirements. So that kind of investor servicing relationship, that communication with the on-the-ground investors has been there, and I think is quite important. And I think zones operators and the authorities realize that and appreciate that. And in terms of prospective investors, those for the future, I think that's been pretty tricky times. I mean, it's not much new investments have been going into zones, obviously, but I think what we've seen and what we've heard is that line of communication has been maintained, so that zone operators, while they're focusing very much on mitigating the crisis and helping their current tenants, I think prospective investors or investors that they were talking to when the crisis hit appreciate the fact that the zone is still in dialogue with them and maintaining that relationship, so that when things do settle down and things are in a position where these investments can be materialized, then that continuation of the dialogue will actually help those investments materialize in whichever shape or form they may be.
Absolutely. Very well said. It's generally said today's entrepreneur is tomorrow's small and medium enterprise. Today's small and medium enterprise is tomorrow's large organization. So if we nurture, foster, and provide adequate support right from the beginning to the existing as well as the incumbents, it would add a lot of value to the free zones. As we are moving more towards the final 10, 15 minutes, I want to now take both of you towards the future. I want to ask one question and request Dr. Piquet to answer, and then Mr. Sharif, you could also answer the same. Having spoken about what are the practices, what is good, what are the guidances, so we talked a little bit about history, the present. I want to your expert opinion on future. So, Dr. Piquet, how do you see the future of economic zones from here? We've been growing, economic zones have been around for 50 plus years, but in the last 15, 20 years, they have grown phenomenally, present in almost 130, 140 countries, operating and controlling almost 1/3 of the global trade. So huge contribution to the global economy. And having gone through this pandemic, how do you foresee the future? I mean, I like to use the term crystal gazing. If there's a crystal ball in front of us and we want to anticipate what is in store for us in future, where do you think it is going? Doctor, please.
Yeah, it's a very important question. Let me tell you that in order to answer this question, I feel that we have to fly to the future and come back and to do things that we see. Let me tell you that because this is an exercise that I have been doing during a long time with people visiting 22@. When I was the CEO of 22@, we received more than 300 delegations every year, trying to understand what's next, what's the future. The future is something that is, if we want to wait, that's good, but it's not enough. The reality means that we have to create the future. And the future, it seems that we put two key elements, digital world and green world. This is two key elements that we'll need because we need sustainability in our world, but also we need to use better and better the technology. That's the reason why, from my point of view, the economic zones will be hybrid places where we will put everything in the cloud that is in the earth. It means that the economic zones must be connections of the place with the cloud, because if we have everything to the cloud, we will share, we will use, we will reuse. It means that we were talking before about that, but also because the economic zones will be airports of innovation. Why? Because we'll be hubs of the world. In the same way that we had in the past logistics as hubs, we need hubs of innovation. And hubs of innovation means economic zones that are accelerators of innovation and also places where you can replicate and scale solutions. This is the important role of the networks. When I was president of ISP, the International Association of Science Parks, we were using the parks as a platform of innovation, promoting that every entrepreneur could fly from one country to another, from Russia to Barcelona, from Barcelona to Porto Alegre, from Porto Alegre to Silicon Valley. Why? Because we need speed. And speed is about transaction cost, or it's about trust. And trust means about protocols, but also people that know each other and can really share the way of helping us. Speed is something that we can really take advantage of technology, but also of people that know each people. That's the reason why the networks, the Free Economic Zone network, the ISP network, this kind of network will be the real connections between the different economic zones. For this reason, from my point of view, the future means about innovation. Innovation means not only technology, also talent. Talent and technology is productivity, but talent and technology is also competitiveness. But more than that, talent and technology is employability. Because if we don't have people ready with enough skills, we will not have enough workers, and worse, we will not have a good place for the future. In this way, I believe that economic zones must be responsible for the economic development of the world and must be the platform for this new knowledge-based economy.
Absolutely. Digitalization, greenification, innovation seem to be what they call in the world the mantra for future, and this is a huge learning. Mr. Sharif, what do you think? Where is all this going from the World Bank global perspective of yours, please?
I think to add onto that, again, completely concur with everything that was said. And it was kind of touched upon earlier in terms of the green wall. And Dr. Joseph used the word kind of hub. And I think, as we move forward, and again, this is something that's already been happening, but I think as we move forward, then we see economic zones really as hubs of green and resilient competitiveness. And what we're talking about there is implementing basically eco-industrial park kind of guidelines. And that's all about environmental green and also social sustainability. And I think the driver there is that it actually makes business and economic sense for an industrial park or an economic zone to be green. It makes business sense for the green infrastructure to be in place in terms of efficiencies, in terms of water efficiencies and power efficiencies and cost savings associated with that, and how that feeds into the bottom line of the zone itself and also the operators within the zone. So yeah, so I think really going forward, by default, in addition to all the digital wall which was spoken about, I think by default, zones moving forward, either new zones or existing zones that need to adapt, need to be hubs and centers of green, resilient and social competitiveness and sustainability.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think we are moving almost towards the last 5-6 minutes, and I want to wrap up by sharing what World Free Zones Organization as an initiative has been doing. And of course, before I wrap up, I'll also request for a 1-minute final comment from both of you. But let me share. The World Free Zones Organization, many of you will be aware, is an association acting as the voice of all the free zones in the world. We are present in over 130 countries. We have members we have truly a global presence, registered in Geneva, operational from Dubai. Now, we have a great initiative, what we call Free Zone of the Future. It reflects many elements that we have spoken about today, and one of the elements is about being clean. Now, I did a research project about 4 years ago. I titled it as Next Practices Beyond Best Practices. So my idea was, what are the next practices? What is best today may not be best tomorrow. How do we anticipate what is in store for us? So we came up with a framework, and we said there are 3 main pillars. Many of them have already been addressed by our distinguished panelists. 1 is sustainability, 2 is innovation, and 3 is best in class. Under sustainability, we have eco-friendly free zone, good place to work, which uses ILO's decent work agenda, and socially responsible zones, which focuses on CSR. Under innovation, we have entrepreneurship, building incubation center, SME development, and innovative free zones. And under best in class, we have safe and secure zones, which uses the principles of authorized economic operator of World Customs Organization, and smart zone or tech-ready zone, and of course, capability development. On all these 9 elements, we have a certification. And the certification process is a progressive certification. All of them have a pre-assessment questionnaire, which tells you as a zone, where do you stand today? And then if you get, say, 30 marks, you are bronze certified. 50 is silver. 70 is gold. 85 is platinum. So progressively, you go through the process, and then you finally get certified. One of those certifications, which is ready for implementation, if anybody is interested, is the Green Zone certification. It's a very interesting tool. Again, we have 7 criteria here. Water usage, electricity, green construction, green operations, green transportation, and each one has 4 sub-criteria. So there are totally 28 criteria on which questions are asked. we identify where does a free zone stand today. And we look at what are the strong areas, what are the areas that need improvement. And then we do hand-holding, we provide inputs to improvise the areas which needs attention in those free zones. And progressively take them through step by step into a greenification. The advantage of this is, as we said in the beginning, it looks at reducing the pollution. It looks at being more eco-friendly. And when you have all the certifications, which is socially responsible, green zone, innovative zone, tech-ready zone, safe zone, it sort of prepares you for the future in a robust way. This certifications would not only help one to recover faster from the pandemic or the impact, the adverse impact of the pandemic, but would also make them robust and resilient so that in future, even if we are struck with something, the damages are minimized or you totally prevent them by being totally in control of things. So this is a tool that I wanted to share with our audience. We have about 2 to 3 minutes left. I want final thoughts from each one of you. Dr. Joseph, last thoughts on for about 1 minute, please.
Coming back to the future. At the end of the day, we're writing the future. We can try to understand if the future will come, and we can write the future. We are part of the history we write, and we understand how responsible we are of the challenge that we have now in the world, in terms of green and in terms of digital. That's the reason why I feel that the economic zones must be places for exploration, for innovation, and promoting technology, with technology and talent, the new innovations and new ideas. From my point of view, economic zones can really be the places for what's next. And it means that we have to be ready for that, and we have to explore and to develop pilots and to scale globally.
Excellent. Mr. Sharif, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think from my perspective as well, on top of that, can we go back to that ecosystem? And really, zones play a really important role in that whole ecosystem that's around them and regionally. And if done properly and if integrated with all the ecosystem that's around them, then I think they can really be integrators of innovative and sustainable competitiveness as we move forward into the world beyond COVID and the digital age. So yeah, that's final thoughts from me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Very, very well said. Let me thank both our distinguished panelists for doing such a lot of value addition to the knowledge base of our listeners. It's been an excellent discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. So all of you, wish you good luck and have a good day. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Uy, mira, que me dejo la mascarilla, ¿eh? Buena costumbre tengo yo, ¿sí o no? Muchas gracias. Thank you, Dr. Mohan, por moderar este panel con tan buenas preguntas. Gracias a Servi Habitat por hacerlo posible. Gracias a Sherif, a Josep Miquel por acompañarnos aquí. Y gracias a todos vosotros, asistentes, por acompañarnos de nuevo en Economic Zones. Os dejamos con una conexión a la estación de Francia, con una Inspirational Speak, la primera del día. En este caso será con el meteorólogo Mario Picazo. Él hablará de, el título de su conferencia es Desenergizando el clima de la Tierra. Ahí vamos. Hasta luego.